So moving on to the things that really matter, the grants, because that's what justifies these things at the end of the day. There are two types of grants that are worthwhile understanding: the renewable heat incentive and the feed-in tariff. Both have been out for a number of years. Both are working reasonably well. The feed-in tariff pays for electricity, and the renewable heat incentive pays for heat. Now, if you're running a business, then the commercial RHI phase 1 has been running for the last year, and it is working very well, and we do get our money, and it does work. Phase 2 for domestic sites is due to come into force this year. They say in the autumn, so that I guess is any time between August and next June. The governments haven't had a great track record of bringing these things out on time, but they say it'll be autumn. At the moment, as we sit here today, the government are talking about rates of between 12.5 pence and 17.3 pence per kilowatt hour that a heat pump generates. Now, to put that into context, an oil-fired boiler costs about 8 pence per kilowatt hour to run. A ground source heat pump, if done properly, should cost you about 2.5 pence per kilowatt hour to run. So they're going to pay you 8 times what it costs you to heat your house in subsidy. That's why I say the payback periods for these things will be counted on the one hand, between 2 and 5 years on average. So keep an eye on this. If it comes in, and we'll know really in the next 2 or 3 months whether they really are going to do this, then start getting things moving, because there will be a rush. I'm not trying to be a salesperson here, and this cannot go on for long. These rates are too generous. Just like the PV was, there was a rush and then they cut it. For air source heat pumps, the government recognised they're not as good as ground source heat pumps, so the rates are basically half. For biomass boilers, the cost of the fuel is a lot less than it is for ground source heat pumps, because of course they run on electricity, so the rate looks less, but it's about the same as for a ground source heat pump, if you know what I mean, because the fuel cost only costs you 2 pence per kilowatt hour anyway. Solar thermal systems, that is actually the most generous of all, because the sun is completely free. There is no cost of running a solar thermal system. All you've got to do is hope the sun shines. The tariff lifetime for the feed-in tariff and the commercial RHI is 20 years, 20 to 25 years. The tariff lifetime for the RHI phase 2, which is the domestic, is only 7 years. So the payback is extremely good, but the payback period is short. What it does mean is you have 7 years to get your capital cost back and interest, and then forevermore you'll be heating your house at a fraction of the cost that you would have been before. This is a house. Actually, this is St Giles House, which is the Shaftesbury Estate House. We put a bit of everything into this that we could. They didn't have a hydro site, unfortunately. It was worthwhile. But the heat pumps generate about 250,000 kilowatt hours a year there, which means that he's saving about £14,000 a year of what he would have been on oil. The solar PV is generating 30,000 kilowatt hours a year, and in terms of cost saving, that's actually, believe it or not, only worth £1,000, because electricity is you can buy it anyway most of the time. Solar thermal is generating 9,000 kilowatt hours a year, so that's saving him about £800 in the costs. So all in all, you can see that the biggest payback there is the heat pumps, which are also the most expensive to put in. But in general, he's saving about £16,300 a year running his house. On top of that, he then gets the grants. And the RHI, because he's getting it, is probably going to be paying him £40,000 a year for the next 7 years. The feed-in tariff actually is generating for him £9,000 or £10,000 a year. The solar thermal will probably generate about £1,500 a year. So his actual annual subsidy is worth a maximum of £52,000 a year. So he's saving around about, on average, say £60,000 a year by putting in about £300,000 worth of kit. So The bad news is he had to find £300,000. The good news is that the payback period is about 5 years.